most of us, and this is very much in alignment with what happens from a global perspective. Now, if you did write a prescription in this scenario, did you keep documents in terms of your rationale for prescribing, and did you keep these records for as long as is required by the HPCSA? Can I have a show of hands? The lights are in my eye, but I can literally see one or two hands. So that's a problem, but we'll come back to it. You are in a WhatsApp group of 25 friends and family members. You are not the administrator of the WhatsApp group. A racist remark is made by your close friend AB. Everyone gets quiet on the group. What would you do? Option 1, ignore. You are not getting involved. It's safer to stay out. Option 2, you phone or you directly message AB and tell him to retract that comment and apologize to the group. Or 3, you actually post on the group that this remark is inappropriate and that you dissociate from it. Take this for 1, 2, fair number, almost half, and 3, the remaining half. So we'll get back to this as well. Final question. You embark on a business venture with your uncle. You are a silent partner and you discover financial irregularities. You stop contributing to the rental of the property. You seek legal recourse. Your uncle reports you to the HPCSA for unprofessional conduct. An explanation is requested within 40 days by the HPCSA. What would you do? 1, ignore, hoping that it disappears, and believe you me, lots of people do this. 2, you will provide an explanation after getting some help to craft that response. Or 3, you inform the HPCSA, really there is no doctor-patient relationship, and so there is no need to provide an explanation. Take us for 1, 2, 3, and 3. Equal number. All right. So what I'd like to share with you this morning is that none of us in this room are immune to complaints. And the reality is that irrespective of whether we are guilty or not of unprofessional conduct, the reality is that it impacts significantly both on our personal and professional lives. And therefore, it's absolutely imperative that we be prepared for this. So let's look at the published data on HPCSA complaints, and they really are on the increase. In 2023-2024, there were in excess of 2,000 complaints. Unfortunately, the vast majority, 80%, were against medical practitioners, doctors, and dentists. The vast majority are in the private practice domain. But having said so, our public sector patients are becoming more aware. And in this last year, I've received lots of queries from registrars, interns, and specialists in the public space about complaints they have received. In the main, the vast majority of these complaints relate to us being negligent, writing poor reports, being incompetent, providing insufficient care. Billing is a huge issue, and very importantly, our inability to communicate to the satisfaction of our patients. So what happens when a complaint is made by a patient? We become the respondents. In the main, that complaint will be reviewed by the HPCSA to gauge whether it's major or minor. If it's something they feel that it's minor and mediation can resolve that, it will go that route. All those that don't meet the mediation route or that are not resolved at mediation route go to the prelim committee. So a prelim investigation occurs, and what happens is that you as a practitioner are asked to provide a report within 40 working days. And my advice to you is that you do so within the 40 days, or if you don't have the time to do it, to get an extension. Because if you stay quiet and don't respond, irrespective of the merits of your case, that you can be penalized for contempt of counsel by not providing a report. Additionally, you cannot cite that your address has changed. Legally, we are expected to inform the registrar of the HPCSA if our address changes within 30 days of that change. So prelim committee, there are 5 prelim committees on HPCSA, will sit and deliberate over the matter. Sometimes they will need additional information in the form of a written explanation from the respondent or the complainant. Occasionally, you might be consulted. Sometimes the prelim committee doesn't have the expertise to resolve that matter and therefore will get an expert opinion. You as the respondent have a right to have access to all of that information. So you're very welcome to ask for that. And then finally, the prelim committee then makes a deliberation. It can either be one of finding no evidence of misconduct, so your explanation can get accepted, or it can be deliberated that there's a transgression or misconduct, and this can be deemed either minor or major. If it is minor, one can get a caution or a fine. And if it is major, it goes to conduct inquiry, which is like a trial, but under the auspices of the HPCSA. Now, say your explanation was accepted, the complainant has the right to not accept this. And now what we have at HPCSA is an appeals committee. So this case can start afresh and now go to appeals committee. Assuming you don't find the caution or the fine satisfactory, you can decline this as well, in which case it doesn't go to an appeals committee, but it would go to conduct inquiry, which is quite a long process. And at conduct inquiry, it's a fresh new start and the entire case can be accepted or there can be penalties. And if there's disagreement at this level, it can go to the High Court. So how do you and I dial down that risk? And I think it's of paramount import that we be aware of the legal constructs and framework within which we practice. And from that perspective, we ought to be familiar with the Constitution, the common law, the Children's Act, the Health Professionals Act, and the National Health Act. And additionally, the ethical guidelines of the HPCSA, particularly those that are relevant to our own clinical practice. It's also very useful to regularly visit the site because there are often updates. In the last 5 years, there's been an update on the social media ethical guidelines and on the telemedicine guidelines, which is something that we are particularly becoming more accustomed to utilizing in our clinical practice. I think it's very important to be cognizant of the areas where our deficits lie, and this really relates to us being able to know what our level of competence is, when to consult, take good histories to avoid medication errors, ensure proper documentation. There are now clinical practitioners for complex cases. They actually record the entire consent process. And communication, of course, is of paramount import. And then I'm going to chat a little bit about treating family and friends and about the social, the aspect of our conduct in the public domain. We focus a lot on our clinical practice, but our administrative component of our practice is equally important. Strong governance, good oversight, identifying gaps, looking at our PAs, looking at where their deficits lie, how do they communicate with patients, how do they communicate results, and upskilling those individuals, ensuring confidentiality, are some of the issues that one needs to ensure proactively rather than reactively. So should you treat family and friends? I think there are numerous advantages to treating somebody close to you, particularly for that individual. They're more comfortable with you, they're exercising their autonomy by choosing who they want to be. Management is often more timely. You tend to do things quicker for people you know. The clinical outcome probably is even better, and of course there might be the attraction of having reduced costs. But there are distinct disadvantages. Consent is a huge problem. Either they won't listen to you completely because of implicit trust, or they might be a bit scared of you as a figurehead and not listen and just agree to whatever you say. You might think you know the patient very well and under-investigate, or alternatively, you may want to do everything right and over-investigate. And then there's the issue of justice. Say you are a physician, there's only one ICU bed in your hospital in the ICU. In private practice, the other one is in the general ward. And there's two patients, your relative who has a slightly poor prognosis than the individual, than the second person who has a better prognosis. Who are you going to send into the ICU? And that is a problem. The other thing is about sometimes our relatives and close friends don't share everything. What if you are an anesthesiologist, your relative is on Ozempic and hasn't told you that? And you have to deal with aspiration on the table, largely because of the delayed gastric emptying. So you can be putting yourself into risk because of a lack of information. What we sometimes forget is that when you have a personal relationship with the individual and you start managing the person, there's the added responsibility from the HPCSA of a professional relationship. We actually have to abide by all the rules, keep documents, keep notes for the prescribed duration. And sometimes we slip up because we are so comfortable. So take a scenario where you treat somebody very close to you. The treatment may be successful, the relationship may be continuing to be well, everything is fine, no problem, and you're a hero in that patient's eye. Sometimes, say you treat an individual, say it was your spouse. Treatment was successful. Everything went well. 3 years down the line, you have a divorce. You are fighting over your children. It becomes acrimonious. And then your partner writes to the HPCSA and says, I was given an antidepressant. By mistake, the dose was double, but it was okay, everything went fine. But there's no records, and I was double dosed, and I was given a high schedule drug. You are in trouble. And that's a reality that occurs. Alternatively, it could be a situation where ab initio you have a complication and there's legal recourse, and there's a legal case. It has been found globally that the risk of litigation is greater when you treat someone closer to you than when you treat a stranger. In fact, if you look at the global practice, in the United States, there are now certain states where you are prohibited from treating anybody who is close to you, or be it a relative or a friend. In Europe, similar move, unless there's an emergency, so one needs to know what one's institutional practice is. In South Africa, it is not illegal to treat close relatives. And I think that largely stems from the fact that we have many remote areas where there's only a single doctor. You have to end up treating your family. Who else is going to treat them? So for us, the practice is a bit different. We often don't have enough doctors to treat or the necessary expertise, so we are forced to actually treat close friends and relatives. But I think it's important to be cognizant of the repercussions that may arise, and so that one can proactively take measures to prevent that. Is a once-off script really that serious? Absolutely. Casual prescribing, particularly in the corridor, don't go there. It's difficult the first time to tell somebody, I'm sorry, I don't write scripts. But the more often you do it, the easier it becomes. Just makes your life difficult later in life, especially if those relationships deteriorate or if an adverse event arises. When you do need to prescribe, please make notes and keep those for the relevant duration. If a family member insists that you be involved in their treatment, seek or advise them on the alternatives that you can assist with, finding them a more suitable doctor, or explaining the consent process to them, explaining the procedure to them, making them comfortable about the procedure or the therapy that they're going to have. Are there times when it's okay to treat family and friends? Absolutely. Emergencies, remote areas, pandemics, COVID. I think every one of us in this room treated family and friends, and that's totally acceptable, as long as you're aware that you must still maintain those professional duties that you are supposed to do. A colleague asks you to treat their spouse. What do you do? I think the most important thing is always to ask yourself questions and see whether you are uncomfortable. Are you going to be objective? Are you being pressured into this? What happens if something goes wrong? Will your work be jeopardized? So if you have negatives to those kinds of questions, then you know what your answer is, and you can actually recommend somebody else that's more appropriate. So when it becomes unavoidable, what are the things that you need to be cognizant about? Declare that conflict. Try and have a team involved so you've got witnesses. Set boundaries. Keep records. Avoid corridor consults. Hand over and make sure there's no privacy breaches. I'm an intensivist. There's very few intensivists in South Africa, so often I have to get involved in situations where I'm not particularly keen to be involved in. And if those are complicated cases, what I generally do is not necessarily at the same time, but even later, I will speak to a peer and say, would you have managed this patient similarly? And I document that later, just to make sure from a medical legal perspective that I have covered myself. So this was a question about your professional behavior. So unfortunately, whether you agree with this or not, we are not supposed to bring our profession into disrepute. So if you go to your child's school match and the referee doesn't favor your child and you start behaving inappropriately and somebody videos that and sends it to the HPCSA, you actually have to show to the HPCSA that, look, I was not being unprofessional. So the answer there is, yes, you have to provide an explanation, and there is a precedent set in the form of the De Grief's case. About 2/3 of our patients use social media to make healthcare choices, and we also spend a lot of time on social media. The reality is that globally and in South Africa, it's been found that our knowledge about the ethical use of social media platforms is actually quite dismal. And if you have not read the Social Media Guideline Booklet 16, I'd advise you to have a look at it. If you are a practitioner that has a professional account, please make sure that your personal account is very difficult for your patients to find. Largely because the HPCSA clearly says or discourages us to have doctor-patient practitioner relationships outside of the clinical doctor-patient relationship. When you do post on social media, remember, even your personal posts can always be found. Nothing is erasable and everything can be found. Always ask yourself, would I say this aloud? Am I being offensive? Am I being prejudiced? Does this place my reputation the reputation of my profession at risk. And whenever you forward something, I know we all like to forward something quickly, make sure, ask yourself, who made this? What is the source? Why am I sharing it? And when was it published? And you'll be amazed at the answers. If you do have a professional practice social media account, please ensure that you don't practice touting. So you can't say, come to my rooms and there's free Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi is not part of what a doctor should be offering. You cannot also canvas, say you are the best doctor that's around. Be very clear about that. I often go through social media accounts of a professional, of professionals, and there's a fine line, and often I do suspect that it is being crossed. If somebody writes a bad review about you, get professional advice on how to manage this. Consider going offline directly with the patient if you are somebody who can maintain your cool and be diplomatic, and ask the patient how you can improve that. But you absolutely refrain from an online public angry response. And if somebody writes something that really angers you, particularly if it's not true, just mute, block, or report to the site host. Our opinion on private messages, safe. So this, I'm talking about you and your best friend. If you write something to them, absolutely not. If for example, the police were to get your phone, they could actually use anything from your phone legally in a court of law. Can you record a conversation without a participant's consent? Who thinks we can? So in South Africa, you can, as long as you are party to a conversation. So when your patient comes into the room, and if they don't ask you, they can still record you and legally use your conversation, something that we're often not aware of, and it's important to bear that in mind. So the WhatsApp answer here was 3. You have to post on the group. You have to say, I dissociate myself from this. And there has been a case in South Africa where someone did not do this and they were held accountable for this. So be very careful of what your group is about, what is being said, and protect yourself. And this is an article in the SAMJ. If you haven't read this, it's about how to use WhatsApp legally in South Africa. It's a brilliant article. I would recommend that you get hold of this and go through it. I really don't have the time, but it tells you clearly what you can and what you cannot do with WhatsApp, and it's actually quite frightening. Influencer marketing. Does anyone use influencers to boost their practice here? So it's something that is happening. It's a very untested zone. All I would say is tread this very carefully and make sure there's no touting or canvassing by your influencer. And remember, your influencer can also turn on you when things go wrong. We're living in the era of AI. Already many of us are using, I think all of us are using AI tools in our clinical practice. I just want to say, whatever AI-generated tool you are using, check the authenticity of it, check what's in the black box, make sure you are comfortable, because when things go wrong as clinicians, if you are using the tool, we actually are accountable. So if you do get a complaint or a letter from the HPCSA for any explanation, I think the most important thing is don't take it personally. It can happen to anybody. It does not equate with unprofessional conduct or poor clinical performance. Get help. Also remember self-care, because this is a time when things can go downhill. Don't engage with the media, and make sure you get your facts right. And just to wrap up, just want to say, when things do go wrong, it's okay to practice empathy, to say, I am sorry this happened, or I'm sorry you are going through this. And this is not the same as saying, this is my fault, which is something I wouldn't advise anyone to do, or say, I made a mistake that has ended up in this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Paruk, for keeping to time to the second. It was excellent. The last speaker for this morning is Dr.